The stars of The Green Mile are finally spilling the beans on details that flew right over the heads of even the most die-hard enthusiasts. Critics and audiences alike have hailed this masterpiece as perhaps the single greatest adaptation of Stephen King's twisted genius ever committed to celluloid. We are talking about a cinematic experience so gut-wrenching and profoundly devastating that it forces even the most hardened stoic men to break down and weep openly like children. It is a narrative that pulled off the impossible trick of making us fall deeply, hopelessly in love with a convicted killer waiting to die on death row, the unforgettable story of the Green Mile. To millions of cinema addicts around the globe, this harrowing saga of miracles, gross injustice, and ultimate redemption stands tall as one of the most emotionally shattering pieces of art in history. But imagine if I told you that lurking just beneath that polished, familiar exterior lies a shadowy underworld of dark secrets that not even the most obsessive fans have managed to dig up. Right now here on Legacy Unmasked, we are ripping the curtain all the way back to expose the most tightly guarded, controversial mysteries surrounding the Green Mile. These are shocking revelations coming directly from the mouths of the cast and crew who poured their blood, sweat, and tears into bringing this legendary tale to life. We are diving into the clandestine meanings, the chaotic on-set confessions, and the subtle symbolic breadcrumbs scattered throughout the footage that will fundamentally alter how you view Paul Edgecombe's tragic path. From Tom Hanks's startling admissions regarding the heavy spiritual toll his character's journey took on his own psyche, all the way to the absolutely mind-blowing physical and emotional metamorphosis of Michael Clarke Duncan as the gentle giant John Coffey, and the deleted scenes that would have twisted the film's message into something else entirely. This is the raw, untold, and uncensored history of the Green Mile. And I give you my word, by the time we finish exposing these truths, you will never be able to watch the Green Mile with the same eyes ever again. But first, let's talk about the movie that almost never existed. Before we get into the juicy cast gossip, you need to wrap your head around a truly wild fact. This masterpiece came dangerously close to never hitting theaters at all, following the devastating commercial flop of The Shawshank Redemption. And yes, you heard that right. That legendary film was originally labeled a total box office disaster. Hollywood was scared. Director Frank Darabont was incredibly gun-shy and hesitant about trying his luck with yet another depressing Stephen King prison drama. The big studios were just as skeptical, seriously doubting if modern audiences had the patience to sit through a grueling 3-hour saga set on death row. It was only the involvement of the legendary Tom Hanks that proved vital in forcing the executives to finally give the project the green light. His massive star power, fresh off the heels of Forrest Gump and Saving Private Ryan, forced the studios to pay attention, but even then they fought tooth and nail against the film's massive runtime. Very few people realized that Darabont took a colossal career risk by flat-out refusing to cut a single frame or compromise on the movie's epic length. He knew deep in his bones that this specific story required every agonizing minute of screen time to properly flesh out the characters and deliver that crushing emotional blow. This stubborn, unyielding dedication to his artistic vision paved the way for what would eventually become one of the most emotionally powerful films Hollywood has ever produced. It was a story that demanded every second to work its dark magic on our breaking hearts. Now, let's look at the prison that built the mile. One of the most critical factors in crafting the film's suffocatingly authentic vibe was the bold decision to construct the entire death row set completely from the ground up. Unlike Shawshank, which was shot inside the cold walls of an actual penitentiary, the Green Mile needed a bespoke environment tailored to handle the unique supernatural demands of the script. The visionary production designer Terrence, Marcia Mann, who had already snatched Oscars for Dr. Zhivago, and Oliver built the Mile with an obsession for historical accuracy that bordered on madness. That sickly green linoleum that gives the Mile its iconic name was color-matched to the exact depressing shade used in southern prisons during that dusty era. Even the electrical wiring and the buzzing light fixtures were period correct. David Morse, the man behind Brutus Brutal Howl, opened up about how that meticulously crafted set seeped into the cast's brains. He admitted that the set was truly something else entirely. The corridor itself was psychologically engineered to generate a sense of mounting, suffocating dread the deeper you walked. The cells grew darker, and the lighting became significantly more ominous. That prison set was not merely a backdrop for the actors, it transformed into a living, breathing, malevolent character in the movie. The crew went as far as building a fully functional electric chair, the infamous Old Sparky, capable of simulating execution sequences with a level of realism that was honestly terrifying. Special effects wizard Charles Gibson rigged the chair to produce controlled smoke and flickering lighting effects, making those death scenes disturbingly stomach-churningly real. Sam Rockwell, who perfectly portrayed the chaotic Wild Bill Wharton, noted that filming those execution moments created a heavy, uniquely tense atmosphere that hung over the set like a shroud. For the horrific scene of Dell's botched execution, they deployed multiple cameras to nail it in as few takes as possible, simply because the burning prosthetics and pyrotechnics were wildly expensive and emotionally draining for everyone involved. The cast has since revealed a chilling detail: Frank Darabont actually made them experience the isolation of the cell block in total dead silence before the cameras ever started rolling. For one entire agonizing afternoon, the actors were locked into their characters' positions. Guards standing watch prisoners rotting in cages and were ordered to just exist in that heavy space without uttering a single word. This intense psychological exercise helped them soak in the crushing weight and monotonous routine of prison life, adding layers of reality to their performances. Now, let's look at the characters behind the characters. What most casual viewers fail to realize is that each of the lead actors concocted extensive tragic backstories for their on-screen personas' intricate details never once mentioned in the script, yet they informed every subtle gesture and every whispered line. Tom Hanks has opened up about how he fabricated a deep personal history for Paul Edgecombe that extended far beyond the boundaries of the film's narrative. He imagined Paul as a veteran scarred by the trenches of World War I, which perfectly explained his fundamental desire for peace and his viscerally disturbed reaction to Percy's sadistic cruelty. It brought back harrowing flashbacks of the chaotic, purposeless brutality he had endured during his time on the battlefield. To truly inhabit the soul of John Coffey, the late Michael Clark Duncan immersed himself in the heavy atmosphere of hospitals, quietly observing patients desperate for relief. That emotional homework seeped into the very DNA of his acting, adding layers of raw authenticity that fly under the radar for the casual audience member. Watch closely when Coffey is confined behind bars. Duncan intentionally shrinks his massive frame, adopting a posture that screams of innocence and vulnerability. Yet witness the transformation during the miracles. When he draws the sickness out of Paul, his stance shifts instantly to one of undeniable commanding authority. On the darker side of the aisle, Doug Hutchison tapped into a personal nightmare to play Percy Wetmore, modeling that distinct brand of evil after a tormentor from his own youth. By anchoring Percy's malice in reality, he created a villain so genuinely repulsive that it makes your skin crawl just watching him breathe. It is this fusion of private trauma and meticulous study that elevated The Green Mile from a simple fantasy script into a deeply human masterpiece of cinema. But beyond the performances, there is a treasure trove of secret messages buried in the frames that you likely missed. The film is absolutely saturated with visual metaphors that even the most die-hard enthusiasts fail to spot until they have watched it a dozen times or more. Over the decades, the creative team has slowly peeled back the curtain-dropping breadcrumbs about these concealed artistic choices in various retrospectives. You have to look past the obvious. The color green is not merely used for the linoleum floor of the prison block. It is actually a grim reaper in disguise. Notice how that sickly lime hue dominates the screen like the drapes in the death chamber, or that dry sponge whenever the end is nigh. It even glints in the reflection of Wild Bill's manic eyes, upon his arrival, a subtle visual cue of danger that bypasses your logic and hits you straight in the subconscious. Furthermore, the sequences depicting the miraculous cures are doing a lot more narrative heavy lifting than you might realize. When John Coffey extracts the infection from Paul or dissolves the tumor in Melinda's brain, we are witnessing something far grander than simple biological repair. Every single person touched by John's gift experiences a total metaphysical overhaul, leading Paul to fundamentally doubt the morality of his profession. Even Melinda does not just recover her memories. She reverts to a state of pure, childlike grace, communicating with John on a wavelength that only the innocent can access. He is salvaging souls rather than just flesh, a theme bolstered by the script's heavy reliance on scriptural allegories. Listen to his heartbreaking confession about being tired and lonely, like a sparrow in the rain. It is a direct poetic invocation of Psalm 102. The verse speaks of being like an owl among the ruins, a solitary bird watching from the rooftop while the world sleeps. This parallel serves to elevate Coffee from a mere gentle giant into a legitimate Christ figure burdened by the sins and pain of a fallen world. Once you view the movie through this theological lens, seemingly insignificant interactions suddenly carry the weight of gospel. The removal of the shackles before the electric chair mirrors the descent from the cross, and when Paul begs for guidance, John's command to be still is chilling. It is the ultimate expression of divine surrender, echoing ancient texts. And speaking of divine tests, let's talk about that mouse. Mr. Jingles, the seemingly indestructible rodent that befriends Dell, is arguably the most cherished icon of the entire production. However, do not be fooled by the cuteness. This little guy is not just there to lighten the mood between scenes of despair. That mouse functions as the film's ethical barometer. You can judge a character's entire soul based solely on how they interact with him. It is the primary litmus test. Dell, despite his heinous past, offers tenderness, whereas Percy attempts to crush the life out of it for sport. Even Paul starts with indifference, but eventually crosses a line to actively shield the creature from harm. That decision is a critical dress rehearsal for the impossible choice he must make later regarding the life of John Coffey. It poses the central dilemma of the story. Do the helpless deserve our mercy, even when offering it costs us everything? The cast defines their morality through a mouse long before they are forced to confront the miracle of the man in the cell. This deliberate symbolism adds a tragic layer to the ending, where we discover Mr. Jingles is still alive, defying nature decades later. Just like Paul the mouse is burdened with the blessing of longevity, a living artifact of magic trapped in a mundane gray world. Finally, we need to discuss how the environment itself acts as a narrator through the use of atmospheric conditions. The filmmakers masterfully utilize the weather to externalize the internal anguish of the prison, using rain and storms to mirror the mood. Note the chaotic, violent thunderstorm that rages outside during the botched, horrific execution of Dell. Contrast that with the unnatural stillness when John reveals his secrets, or the crystal-clear starlit sky on the night he finally sits in the chair. The elements are perfectly at peace, reflecting the acceptance and release that John has finally found within himself. But the biggest reveal is in the epilogue. When Paul stands over Coffey's grave, we are treated to the first genuine sunshine in the movie. It is the solitary moment of warmth. Virtually every other exterior shot is draped in shadow mist or the darkness of night. The sun is only allowed to break through the clouds once Paul has finally unburdened himself of the secret he has kept for 60 years. It is a stroke of directorial genius that manipulates your feelings without you ever realizing you are being guided. The Mile is a place of eternal shadow, suggesting that true peace and the light that comes with it is something earned only through the truth, as we explore here on Legacy Unmasked. The sheer terror John Coffey felt regarding the pitch black is haunting. For a legion of dedicated fans, that singular moment where John admits his fear right before his execution stands as the absolute emotional peak of the entire movie. Please, boss, don't put that thing over my face. Don't put me in the dark. This gut-wrenching scene is ripped straight from the pages of Stephen King's original novel, where Coffey's paralyzing dread of the darkness is described in vivid, heartbreaking detail. What truly makes this sequence devastate the viewer is how it completely strips away the supernatural aura to humanize John Coffey. Despite possessing gifts that rival the divine and a Christ-like spirit, he remains susceptible to a terrified, childlike fear that resonates with every single person watching. The gentle giant capable of performing miracles still desperately craves simple human comfort. This vulnerability fundamentally shifts how the audience perceives the prison guard's final decision. When Paul chooses not to place the traditional execution hood over John's head, it ceases to be a mere breach of death row protocol. It becomes an act of supreme mercy granted to a terrified soul. Now let's talk about the dark connection between Percy and Wild Bill. Without a doubt, one of the most toxic and disturbing dynamics within the Green Mile is the friction between Percy Wetmore and Wild Bill Wharton. These two antagonists embody two distinct flavors of malice: the systemic bureaucratic evil fueled by Percy's nepotism and the raw, chaotic anarchy unleashed by Wild Bill. That chilling interaction where Wild Bill snares Percy through the bars and whispers vile obscenities into his ear changes everything. It traumatizes the arrogant guard so deeply that he freezes during Dell's execution, creating a fatal psychological link between these two villains. Furthermore, there is a poetic, almost karmic justice in how Percy is ultimately driven mad by the very infection Wild Bill carried. When John Coffey transfers that sickness, it brings their twisted narrative circle to a perfect, if horrific, close. Rumor has it that the bigwigs at the studio fought hard to slash Percy's screen time, claiming his antics distracted from the main plot. Fortunately, Frank Darabont understood that without witnessing this petty, everyday cruelty, alongside Wild Bill's violent madness, John's sacrifice would lose its moral gravity. The audience needed to witness how the system is designed to shelter the Percy Wetmores of the world, while it ruthlessly condemns the John Coffeys. This context makes Percy's final destination trapped in a catatonic state within a mental asylum even more satisfyingly tragic. The man who mercilessly abused his authority ends up just as powerless as the prisoners he tormented, guarded by the very institutions he once exploited. But here is the miracle in the Green Mile that you probably missed. While most people assume the central miracle is John's ability to heal the sick, there is a far more subtle and profound interpretation hiding in plain sight. The true miracle isn't the magic, it is the radical moral awakening that takes place within Paul Edgecombe and his team of guards. At the start of the film, these men are merely cogs in a state-sanctioned killing machine clocking in to do a dirty job. By the finale, they have evolved enough to risk their pensions, their freedom, and perhaps even their lives to smuggle an inmate out in a desperate bid to save an innocent soul. This realization elevates the movie from a simple fantasy drama into a deep philosophical masterpiece. It becomes a meditation on how even inside the most rigid and heartless systems, the human conscience can wake up and choose courage. John discovers his own miracle too. He finds a group of men willing to look him in the eye, treat him with genuine dignity, and believe his truth even when they are powerless to stop the inevitable. After a lifetime spent as an outcast, feared and misunderstood, he finally tastes compassion. That is monumental. This multi-layered view of miracles explains why this film still tears at our heartstrings decades later. It is not just about magic hands. It is a story about the miracle of decency blooming in unlikely places. It is about having the strength to see injustice and refusing to be a part of it no matter the price. But did you know the famous ending was almost scrapped? Perhaps the most shocking secret regarding the production is that The Green Mile nearly concluded on a completely different note. That powerful epilogue featuring a 108-year-old Paul, cursed to outlive everyone due to John's touch, was almost left on the cutting room floor. Executives at the studio reportedly pressured the director to roll the credits immediately after John's execution. They argued that the scenes with the elderly Paul in the nursing home felt redundant and dragged out a movie that was already testing the audience's bladder. However, Darabont fought tooth and nail for those final moments because the film is not actually about death. It is about the burden of survival. If we didn't see Paul decades later still haunted by the memory of executing a miracle, we would miss the true agonizing weight of the narrative. Interestingly enough, the sequences with the older version of Paul were actually the very first things shot during the production schedule. This strategy established the emotional baseline for the entire project, ensuring the story was told through the lens of deep regret and memory. The fact that executives wanted to slice these scenes seems insane today, considering how perfectly they wrap up the themes. Without that specific ending, The Green Mile would feel like a totally different movie. It would be reduced to a film about magical healing, rather than a heavy meditation on mortality guilt and the high price of complicity in evil. Even when that evil is unintentional. Before we go, make sure to subscribe to Legacy Unmasked for more hidden truths. Now about the scenes you never saw. Although the massive 3-hour runtime allowed the director to keep most of his vision intact, there were still several scenes that had to be sacrificed. According to whispers from the cast and crew, these unreleased deleted moments would have offered even deeper insight into the key characters, but they remain locked away in the vault. Buried deep within the production archives, there is a fascinating report regarding a specifically deleted sequence. This lost footage featured an extended look at Paul Edgecombe's very first shift walking the halls of Cold Mountain Penitentiary. This scene was crucial because it confirmed Paul was a complete rookie to death row, making his internal moral conflict much more intense later on. Audiences would have witnessed a bright-eyed, idealistic young man slowly coming to grips with the grim reality of what the job demanded. Then there are the missing moments involving Paul's wife, Jan Edgecombe, portrayed by the brilliant Bonnie Hunt. These cuts revealed how the darkness of the mile bled into his sanctuary at home, explaining the underlying tension when he eventually brings up John Coffey. For the die-hard enthusiasts of The Green Mile, these whispered rumors of missing footage. provide a fascinating glimpse into what could have been adding depth to a masterpiece and hinting at character arcs that were unfortunately left in the editing room. Then there is the incredible saga of Michael Clarke Duncan, rising from a simple bodyguard to an Oscar-nominated superstar. The chronicle of how Michael Clarke Duncan became John Coffey stands as one of Tinseltown's most shocking and inspiring fairy tales. It is the story of a man who went from protecting celebrities to becoming an Academy Award nominee in the blink of an eye. Before he walked, the Green Mile Duncan's daily reality was light years away from the glitz of award shows and red carpet premieres. Towering at 6'5" and tipping the scales at nearly 300 pounds, he dug ditches in Chicago before pivoting to security for stars like Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. Back then, his acting portfolio was basically non-existent, filled with bit parts as nameless bouncers or scary thugs in the background. Casting the role of John Coffey was proving to be a nightmare for the production team. The part demanded a paradox, someone with terrifying physical size, who could also convey the gentle innocence of a child and ancient mystical wisdom. Believe it or not, Duncan tried to skip the audition. His manager practically had to force him to go because Duncan didn't think he had the acting chops for such a deep role. What happened inside that audition room has since solidified into a legendary piece of Hollywood folklore. Reports say Duncan was shaking with nerves, stumbling over his words, and struggling to get through the script. But the moment he recited John Coffey's famous line about being tired of people being ugly, the room went dead silent and Darabont knew instantly he had found his man. To get ready for the camera, Duncan hired the renowned acting coach Larry Moss, a man known for prepping stars for career-defining performances. He spent weeks studying caregivers and watching children to mimic their pure, unguarded emotional reactions. He also had to completely rewire his body language, learning to move with a softness that contradicted every intimidating role he had played before. Even when the cameras started rolling, Duncan was fighting a private battle with severe imposter syndrome. It was Tom Hanks who stepped up as a mentor, coaching him through the scenes and guiding him through the pressure of his first blockbuster gig. When the movie finally hit theaters, critics who had zero clue who Michael Clarke Duncan was were left absolutely floored by what they saw. He snagged nominations for both an Academy Award and a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor, a miracle for a guy with barely any experience. Although the Oscar went to Michael Caine for The Cider House Rules that year, the nomination alone completely rewrote Duncan's destiny. He immediately leveled up landing major spots in hits like The Whole Nine Yards Planet of the Apes, The Scorpion King, and Daredevil. The days of playing the silent, scary bouncer in the background were gone forever. Michael Clarke Duncan's metamorphosis from security detail to Hollywood royalty is a timeless reminder that talent can hide in the most unexpected places. Now let's talk about the film's fascinating second life after it left the theaters. The box office numbers for The Green Mile were decent, sure, but they weren't exactly shattering any records at the time. Debuting in December of 1999, it raked in $136 million at home against a $60 million budget good. But not the explosion people expected from Hanks. The movie's real legacy began later finding its true cult following through VHS rentals, DVD sales, and cable TV reruns. It became that rare gem that you feel compelled to show your loved ones the moment you finish watching it yourself. Fueled by powerful word of mouth, it morphed into a cable television staple and stayed on the bestseller charts for physical media for years. It makes sense. A film that preaches patience and taking the long road required the same patience from its audience to truly be appreciated. This isn't a flick you put on in the background. It demands every ounce of your emotional bandwidth. While theaters favor fast-paced thrills, the privacy of home allows viewers to cry and be vulnerable, cementing its status as a modern classic by 2020. You will now frequently find it sitting high on lists ranking the most tear-jerking and impactful movies in cinema history. What started as a gamble on a 3-hour prison drama achieved something way more valuable than just ticket sales. It wove itself into the very fabric of American pop culture. So why does The Green Mile still hurt so good? As we inch closer to the 25th anniversary, we have to ask, why does this specific story haunt us when so many other dramas have vanished? The answer is simple. The Green Mile doesn't just tell a story, it taps into a universal emotional frequency. It taps into our deepest terror of the end, our desperate pleading for the impossible, and that aching need to believe that even in the most corrupt, shattered institutions, a flicker of grace might still survive. It refuses to offer comfortable platitudes or simple fixes for the heavy ethical dilemmas it rips open, avoiding the trap of preaching to the choir. The narrative doesn't force a specific ideology down your throat regarding the death penalty, the nature of the divine, or the ugly stain of systemic racism. Instead, it lays out a raw, unfiltered saga that bleeds into all those territories, trusting you to sweat over the uncomfortable implications and make up your own mind. It treats the viewer as an intellectual equal, respecting your ability to parse through the gray areas without a guide. This sophisticated handling of heavyweights like justice, the finality of death faith, and the possibility of atonement lifts this film far beyond the realm of standard feel-good drama. It stares unblinkingly at the messy, chaotic reality of the human condition while ultimately doubling down on our potential for profound kindness and bravery. At its core, The Green Mile is a testament to the intangible parts of our soul that no cage, no matter how secure, can ever confiscate. It highlights our essential spirit, our decision to remain soft in a cruel world, and our gut instinct to call out wrong when we see it, even if our voice shakes. As long as humanity continues to wrestle with these dark, fundamental questions, this story is going to keep hitting a nerve. In an industry where blockbusters are often chewed up and forgotten like fast food, this masterpiece stands as a monolith, proving that the tales which bury themselves in the deepest recesses of our psyche are the ones that dare to challenge our morals and force us to excavate our own truths. The Green Mile brings us back to the very reason we fell in love with cinema. It is not just a distraction or a way to kill time. It serves as a relentless mirror reflecting both our ugliest nightmares and our most beautiful, soaring hopes right back at us. By dissecting its meticulous construction, we can truly grasp why this piece of art has cemented itself as a modern legend. From the claustrophobic authenticity of the prison, set to the devastating character arcs from the deliberate color grading to Michael. Clark Duncan's soul-shattering portrayal, every single frame was crafted with surgical precision and undeniable purpose. However, it never feels manufactured. It feels organic, as if the director didn't just film a script, but rather excavated a buried historical truth. That authenticity is likely why this film has held audiences hostage emotionally for nearly 25 years without losing a generic ounce of its potency. It transcends the medium of film, entirely feeling less like a movie and more like a raw reality disguised in the costume of fiction. Like the gentle giant whispered to Paul, "The mission is simple, be kind to them, every single one, because that is the only job that matters." If this deep dive sparked a fire in you, I urge you to rewatch the film with a completely new perspective, keeping an eye out for that sickly green motif we analyzed. Watch closely how the storms outside mirror the internal turmoil, and keep a sharp focus on the little mouse mister, Jingles, and how every guard's reaction to him exposes the true nature of their soul. And please drag a friend who hasn't seen it into this experience. There is a unique vicarious thrill in watching a rookie get wrecked by this story for the first time, witnessing the realization dawn on their face. Make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to Legacy Unmasked so you can join us for more investigations into the vaults of cinema history. Ring that notification bell so you are the first to know when we drop our next major exposé. Drop a comment down below and tell us exactly which scene broke you the hardest. We want to hear your thoughts on the film's most powerful moments. Until we meet again, never forget that we all have a date with the Reaper, no exceptions. But sometimes, oh God, that final walk feels like an eternity.